talk a little bit about our different types of tools. First of all, this is your tool panel right here. You'll notice at the very, very top, you'll see two double arrows. You can switch from the vertical single column or vertical double column, depending on what your preference may be. I like to make the most of my screen real estate, so I like the single column myself. Some people like to see the fill and the stroke a little bit larger, which helps in the double column. This first one right here is called the selection tool. This is used to select any kind of object to move it, but this selects the entire object. For example, if I click on it, I can move an object. This is just an empty frame that I made to move around. Okay. This is the selection tool, also known as the black arrow. You also know that V is the shortcut for it. Underneath that is what's called the direct selection tool, or known as the white arrow. This is used for selecting different parts of a selection. For example, it's used to select control points if you want to alter the shape of something. Keep in mind that this is not the same as the selection tool. It selects individual parts. Another tool you're going to be using a lot is the text tool. Now, when you use the text tool, keep in mind that if I wanted to move my document around with the hand tool, if I'm using the text tool, I simply can't do that because it simply just gives me spaces. What I'd have to do, if I'm using the text tool, I have to hold down the Option key, and it gives me the hand tool temporarily. That's when I'm using the text tool. Now keep in mind, when you use the text tool, keyboard shortcuts do not work the same. Like if I wanted to use the zoom tool. If I hit this keyboard shortcut for the zoom tool, it's going to give me a Z. If I grab my selection tool and deselect this text box that we have right here, now because I'm not using my text tool, I can hit Z and get my zoom tool. Let's talk a little bit about zooming in and zooming out. Obviously, you have your zoom tool over here. If I click on it, you'll notice I have a little magnifying glass. It's got a little plus in the middle, meaning it's going to zoom in. Wherever I click, it's going to zoom into that area, and it's also going to center the area that I zoomed in. If I hold down the Option key, you can see it turns to a little minus, meaning I'm going to zoom out. And again, it zooms out of the area that I'm clicking. If I have the zoom tool selected and I want to zoom in on a certain area, I can always click and drag as well, and it makes a marquee. Now you'll notice I'm holding my mouse button down. As soon as I let go of my mouse button, it will zoom into that area. And again, if I ever am zoomed in way too much and I just want to see my entire document again, I can just double click the hand tool and it will bring everything back into perspective. Sometimes it's very easy to get lost. Let's say you zoom in here like this, and of course with my zoom tool selected, I can hold down my space, which will temporarily give me my hand tool. And let's say I move over here and I'm lost. I'm like, where am I? I can't find my document. Just go ahead and double click on your hand tool. Let's also talk about, see my selection tool. I can grab it and select things and delete them. Let's also talk about our rectangle tool. Now you'll notice on some of your tools in the lower right hand corner has this itty bitty tiny arrow. You can hardly even see it. When it has that little tiny arrow, it means that there are other tools available underneath it. If I put my mouse button on it and I click and hold, you can see that I have additional tools. Let's take a look at our rectangle tool. And again, if you don't know what any of these tools are, you just basically put your mouse over it for a second and it'll give you this little message that tells what the tool is and its shortcut key. Let's take a look at our rectangle tool. If I click and hold, you will see that I have a whole bunch of different options here because my rectangular tool has this little tiny arrow. A rectangle is basically just a space to put some sort of a content. It can be text, it can be a picture, whatever. But if I grab my text tool and click inside it, you'll notice this X means it's just basically an empty rectangle. But if I click inside of it, now it becomes a text box. You can see my blinking cursor and I can type stuff. If I grab my selection tool, I can select any individual object and delete it. Okay? Multiple objects and delete it. However, if I grab my direct selection tool, I can select individual parts. which I see I just have that selected. What is InDesign used for? Well, InDesign is a graphic design program that works hand in hand with Adobe Photoshop and Illustrator. Photoshop is for images, Illustrator is for vectored images, and InDesign is for multi-page documents. Okay. InDesign can be used to make magazine advertisements, brochures, infographics. But basically what it is when you have everything, all your vector and your images and everything from Illustrator and Photoshop, InDesign, it's like a stool with 3 legs. Okay, they all work together. They all have their individual purpose. Photoshop is probably the most powerful tool and is used for the most types of design. However, Illustrator and Photoshop and InDesign all work together to provide the tools that any graphic designer should need.